in VRBO house for the last 8 years, and I was told by CPA that the only way I could avoid a huge capital gains tax was to reinvest it in a VRBO home, which I don't want to do because my husband and I are approaching 70, and it's our retirement. So I just want to do this well. I don't really know. I heard on your program last week the same situation, real similar, and that if you make less than $89,000, that it helps you with the capital gains tax. And my husband and I make far less than that. So just wanting to do this well and need some counsel about that.
Yeah, very good. So what would be your ideal scenario? You would liquidate this property, and then what would you do with the funds at that point?
I would like to just invest it in, we have a little bit of money that's invested where we can get to it after a year, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Well, I think you're right. I mean, you need to really take a step back and say, what is the best thing for us in light of our overall financial plan? And if you're not wanting to be a landlord, then I wouldn't go in that direction. I certainly wouldn't let the possibility of taxes drive that decision. It's always good to check with your CPA to get professional counsel based on your specific situation, but just generally speaking, you may not even have any capital gains. You are correct in that the 2023 long-term capital gains rates are, for someone married filing jointly, if you have less adjusted gross income than $89,251, you don't have any capital gains. It's a zero tax rate. Now, that $89,000 is not the amount of profit on the sale of the home, that's your income. So if you don't have taxable income above $89,000, then you wouldn't even have any capital gains. Does that make sense?
It does. I was hoping you were going to say that, but I've just been really nervous about it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, this is our retirement, and we need to do it well.
Sure. Well, I think you're really in a great spot to get some professional counsel. Do you have an advisor that you work with?
I do, and he
Okay.
sent me to a CPA. He said, you really need to have a CPA. So I counseled with someone about it, and that was what I was told, which she told me I would probably have to pay about $150,000 in tax, capital gains tax.
Okay, and so what is the profit going to be on this property?
It was worth about $180 when I inherited it, and it's on the market right now for $495.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm not sure where he's coming up with that number, but again, you do need professional counsel here. There's obviously far more factors that could go into this than just the few moments we have together here on the air. So I would always take the counsel of a CPA, but perhaps you need to get a second opinion just to see exactly why it is he's saying that you would owe so much in taxes here. But I think the bottom line is I wouldn't let the taxes drive this decision. I would go in and talk about your overall financial plan with your advisor in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, and then look at the tax implications as one piece of this decision-making process, but not the only one. Because if you all don't want to be a landlord, the last thing you'd want to do would be to roll this into another property and get stuck with a VRBO that you're having to manage, when that's really not what you want to do. You're looking for a more passive investment strategy. So I'd kind of lean back into this conversation with a tax professional around the capital gains and get them to explain to you why there would be so much owed, given the fact that this is a long-term. Our thanks to Certified Kingdom Advisor Wade Chessman, President and Wealth Advisor, and his team at Chessman Wealth Strategies in Dallas for their support of faith and finance. Their goal is to help their clients expand their understanding of biblical financial principles and how to implement them. The website is chessmanwealth.com. The phone number is 214-572-2120. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
You'll hear from policymakers, congressional leaders, and others each day, 4 p.m. Central Time. Be there.
Here's Pastor Jeff Shreve with From His Heart Ministries.
We need to just say, Lord, I don't understand why these dark lines have come into my life, but I trust you because I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are good. See, I can come to a God like that, who loves me, who's gentle, who's humble in heart.
Learn the depth of God's goodness. Join Pastor Jeff Shreve on From His Heart each weeknight at 6 Central here on American Family Radio.
What's most important to you when it comes to choosing your financial advisor? Someone who's aligned with your biblical values? How about someone who will take the time to explain your options? Certified Kingdom Advisors are professionals who meet high standards in competence and integrity and have been trained to offer biblical financial advice. To find a Certified Kingdom Advisor in your area, visit faithfi.com and click Find a CKA.
We are grateful for support from Eventide Investments on the Faith and Finance program. Eventide's approach to values-based investing is grounded in the belief that humankind was created in the image of God, with intrinsic dignity, value, and worth. Eventide calls this investing that makes the world rejoice. More information is available at eventideinvestments.com. That's eventideinvestments.com.
Today, exploring debt and other issues on Faith and Finance on American Family Radio. I'm Sharon Epps in the studio with Rob West. Jana from Texas, welcome today. How can we help you?
Thank you for taking my call. We have rental properties, and we have a tenant that's reached out to us and is wanting to rent to own our home. And I was just wondering if, where do I begin?
All right. Well, let's start with your purposes and goals. Are you desiring of selling this rental property, or how does that fit with your long-term plan?
Yes, this is one that we would like to sell.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a great opportunity. I think where I would start is talking to an attorney to make sure that you get an agreement drawn up properly. You have to make decisions about how much of the rent you might credit towards the purchase price of the property and come to agreement on a sales price as well. And all of those things need to be documented in a way that you've got an ironclad agreement up front on how it's going to work. Do you know a Christian real estate attorney you might talk to?
I do not.
Okay. Another opportunity you might want to consider as part of this is, are you interested in financing it long term, or would you want just to do it for the rental period and then have them apply for a loan when they take over the ownership?
I think, probably the second option would be better. I don't know that we want to do like a 20-year kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, I would also be sure that they could qualify from a credit standpoint before you enter into this agreement so that you're not surprised on the back end where they couldn't go and get their loan. So those are just several things you'd want to consider. But I think a real estate attorney would be really helpful to help you navigate, make sure that you get the agreement drawn up the way it needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think the key here is just recognize, one of the benefits is this tenant if they've been in there a while, and so you've in a sense vetted them. But if they decide not to buy the home down the road, they could leave you to find another tenant or have to start this selling process all over again. It does take time, and so you may be in a situation where you'd rather just sell it outright and be able to move on. I also realize you may want to try to bless this tenant and work with them if they really want the home. So I think you've just got to balance this idea of how quickly do we want to get out from under this versus being able to work with this current tenant that we know, perhaps have a relationship with, and be willing to sell this to them over time, and also just define on the front end what are the off ramps if in fact they change their mind. But I think Sharon's exactly right. A real estate attorney is a great place to start because you want to make sure you have this really buttoned up in terms of the legal side and make sure there's good, clear communication about what the expectations are. Does that all make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Janet, God bless you. Thanks for calling today. 800-525-7000 is the number to call. Sharon, we mentioned that we have a new debt assessment tool that we rolled out today at faithfi.com/debt. Talk to us about how that can be helpful for folks who really want to get out of debt and just wondering the best way to do it.
One of the best parts of the exercise is it helps you gather all your debts and know exactly where you are. And we talk a lot about the fact that knowledge helps us make good decisions going forward. And unless I know what my balances are, I don't know how to get started. And I think the thing that's great about this, we mentioned in the earlier segment, it gives you a choice about the way that you pay your debt. You could pay it smallest balance first or highest interest rates first, whichever appeals the most to you in the way you like to handle your money. And I think the thing that excites me is it literally allows you to track it every month, and you can watch your debt balances going down and celebrate along the way.
Yeah, I think that's so key, and just have the ability to kind of understand the impact of putting margin against that debt, which is really the key. We've got to get above that monthly payment so we can get more and more going to debt repayment toward the principal. The challenge is, Sharon, this is out in the news today. Jim Henry, who's on our team, has just shared with us that a new report by Lending Club shows that 60% of adults now say they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that's due in part to, of course, high inflation and interest rates on credit card and other debt. And so that's just putting the squeeze on now a majority of Americans who just don't have any margin, which means we've got to go back to that budget and do some hard work, right?
And without margin, you won't get out of debt. You just absolutely won't. And so as you're thinking about the money that you can put towards repaying debt, be sure that you put money aside for liquid savings, for that emergency fund, so that you can borrow from yourself when something happens versus having to go back to those credit cards or other sources of lending.
Yeah. Now, what about the person who said, listen, I've never budgeted. I've never had a plan. We just try to do the best we can and control our spending. But now with expenses up, we just can't seem to get ahead. There's always more month than money. Where do I start? How do you counsel somebody who's just really never gone down this road?
Well, that FaithFi app at faithfi.com, I would recommend that from the beginning. Not only do we have a debt assessment, but the app itself helps you organize your money. And I tell you what, if you don't like spreadsheets, this is actually the answer for you, because the app allows you to put your money in virtual envelopes, just like old-timey paper envelopes, except they're on your computer, and you can divide your money up in such a way that you know what's going where. And we always love to say the thing that we leave to last always gets the pressure. And so part of our challenge is making sure that we get the order in such a way that we're able to meet everything we need to and have the liquidity that we need to keep out of debt.
Yeah, and that's really essential. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about today is debt management, or what's also known as credit counseling. What you will find is that at some point, and usually that threshold we find is around $4,000 in credit card debt. If you have more than that, probably best to go ahead and use a debt management company. We recommend our friends at ChristianCreditCounselors.org. They've worked with hundreds and hundreds of our listeners. But here's what's going to happen. They'll actually help you get those interest rates reduced. So when you snowball the debt, essentially by putting extra on those balances beyond the minimum payments, which you can do through credit counseling, you've now got more going to principal because you've got a lower interest rate. They're all pre-negotiated. It's just a matter of accessing those lower pre-negotiated rates through a credit counseling program. Christian Credit Counselors will actually work with you on that spending plan to make sure that it does all fit within your budget, give you some tips and ideas on how to get that in line, and then they'll get you set up so you send one monthly payment and you'll get out of debt on average 80% faster. So you'll actually find how you can contact them when you complete our debt assessment. So as Sharon mentioned, it's there, it's available, it's free, and it's brand new at faithfi.com. That's faithfi.com/debt. Now, Sharon, when we talk about the spiritual implications of all of this, we also have to talk about the relational implications. We know that debt changes the relationship. You talked earlier about the master-slave relationship when we're in debt that the Bible talks about. And that's why it's so important that we're really careful about using debt when family members and friends are involved. Certainly why the Bible discourages co-signing as well.
Absolutely. Because what we find is debt adds another level of expectation to a relationship. And so let's say that I allowed my child to borrow from me. I watched them go and buy a new stereo system while they still owe me money. Well, normally, if I weren't their lender, I would celebrate that they got something new and it would be fun. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, wait, why didn't they pay me back what they owe me first? And it creates expectations, sometimes spoken, sometimes not, that just add extra pressure to relationships that you don't want to have.
That's exactly right. All right, quickly to Florida. Judy, you'll be our final caller. Go ahead. Hi, Judy. Are you with us?
Yes,
Great. Go right ahead.
I have a couple of bank accounts with the amount of about $150,000, and I have it scattered into like a CD of $20,000, and then 4 other accounts of about $150,000. I was wondering which is the best way for me to generate some interest on those money. If I put it all into one account and see if I can generate some interest on that.
Yeah. Judy, let me ask you, are you drawing an income out of this account or any of these accounts, or are you living on other sources of income?
I'm living on other sources of income.
Okay, so you don't need to pull any money out of these accounts on a monthly basis?
No.
Well, Judy, I think it's great that you have this money. I would encourage you to look at when you need access to the money as you think about where to get the interest. Online accounts often offer more interest than the banks, and that's a good place to look. You don't want to tie everything up in CDs that mature at the same time. So you may want to speak with your banker about, we call it laddering the CDs, but what it really just means is having different maturities so that you can have access to the funds in case you need them.
I think that's a great plan. So I'd reach out to your bank where you currently have this. If you want to look for a higher interest rate, bankrate.com would be a great place. If you're comfortable on the internet, maybe you could have a friend or family member help you with that. If you're not, bankrate.com. But I think Sharon's right. Whatever bank it is, work with that banker to ask about maximizing the interest rate, but to give you what we call liquidity. That means the access to the funds at the point which you need it. And often laddering a CD, stacking them on top of each other can be a great way to do that. God bless you, Judy. Thanks for calling today and for being a part of the program. We appreciate it. Well, Sharon, it's been a lot of fun to be along with you today. Always love having you in the studio. Thanks for stopping by.
Glad to be here.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for us. Hey, check out this new debt assessment we just rolled out today. It's free, and I think you'll really like it. It'll help you get out of debt quicker, and you'll find it at faithfi.com/debt. Also, if you'd like to support the work here of Faith and Finance on American Family Radio, you can do that at faithfi.com. Just click Give. On behalf of Sharon Epps, I'm Rob West. For Robert Youngblood, Devin Patrick, and Jim Henry, thanks for being along with us today. May the Lord bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
The views and
90.5 KTXG Greenville, Dallas.
or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. He went through a loss of wealth. He went through a loss of reputation. Share truth. Apply scripture.
Pretty much lost everything.
He lost, his family. Job was steadfast in his trust that God was good, no matter what that goodness looks like in the moment. Join the conversation Saturday afternoon at 5:30 Central on American Family Radio. This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Heaton. Several retail stores in Philadelphia were looted Tuesday night when police say a group of more than 100 teenagers congregated in Center City. Meanwhile, CVS is the latest retailer to throw in the towel because of rampant theft. The pharmacy giant is closing 900 stores because of loss from shoplifting. And Cheryl Casoni says it's no surprise.
Because when they, the last two earnings reports that they've put out to Wall Street, they have said, they call it shrink. Shrink is theft. It's organized theft. It is theft. And these are billions now of dollars that these companies are telling Wall Street, we can't continue to operate under these business conditions. We've seen this with Walmart in Chicago and Whole Foods, same things. This story isn't new.
President Joe Biden spent about 12 minutes talking to striking UAW workers yesterday in what was supposed to be his show of support for the union. But Fox Business host Larry Kudlow says what some workers may not know is that Biden's policies are going to put many of them out of work.
The Green New Deal is destroying jobs. The Green New Deal and the mandates and the regulations, not to speak of the taxes, and the idea that in 10 years you're going to have everyone electric vehicles, not gas-powered cars, but electric vehicles, will cost the UAW perhaps the better part of their membership.
The Republican-led House Oversight Committee is investigating the Secretary of Energy and her failed trip involving an electric vehicle.
The trip was over the summer, and Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm was inside an electric vehicle on a 4-day road trip from North Carolina to Tennessee. Amid concerns that the EV may not have a place to recharge, NPR reported that the Energy Department dispatched an employee in a gasoline-powered car to go on ahead of the group and sit in front of a charging station so as to have one ready when Granholm and others arrived. Family in need of the charging station saw the gasoline-powered vehicle and called the cops. Larry Behrens, Communications Director for Power the Future.
For House oversight leaders to take a look at how much taxpayers paid for this fiasco and what were the consequences of it is really important because, as many people know, there was a staffer using a gasoline-powered car to block an EV charging point so that the Secretary of Energy could continue her trips uninterrupted to show how great the technology is, when in fact that is just proof right there that they can't get, that they can't make cross-country road trips. And so it is important to know what other, things they may have done to try to prove that this technology is ready for prime time when in fact it's not.
I'm Chris Woodward.
Meanwhile, climate hysteria is reaching a fever pitch and the mainstream media is fanning the flames. Steve Jordahl reports.
If you've been paying attention, you may have noticed a rise in the temperature, so to speak, of the reporting you're seeing and hearing surrounding so-called climate change. This is NBC News.
It highlights the devastating impact that climate disasters like California's mega fires can have on the first responders that are on those front lines.
Climate disasters, climate catastrophe, climate crisis. Curtis Alk of Media Research Center says it's as if Chicken Little was the nation's news director.
It is the sky is falling. The media have a penchant for this because they love doom and gloom. It's a way to sell outrage without having to resort to the if it bleeds, it leads kind of story.
Alk says statistically little has changed in the last 100 years or so. Mega fires, as you just heard, hurricanes, tornadoes, drought, rising and falling rivers, they've been happening forever. But the mainstream media is making up a connection.
They take individual weather events, hurricanes, an individual flood, a wildfire, and say, this thing happened because of man-made climate change.
What's not being talked about, at least in the media, is its horrible track record of predictions of the end of the world.
There's no accountability. ABC said in 2008 that New York City could be underwater by climate change in 2015. Well, here we are in September 2023, and that obviously has not been the case.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
And Wall Street is holding steadier today as its sharp September slump eases up a bit. More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty
Keith. Sometimes it can be hard to catch each live broadcast. This could be due to your job, school, or just life in general. We understand, which is why you don't have to miss out. The AFR podcast page is where you can find all of your favorite shows. Whether it's old or new, you can listen and download each broadcast that you've missed, including the ones you've already heard. Just visit the podcast page at afr.net. Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Morning. Morning, how are we doing? Good, how are you doing? Thanks.
American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening to AFR. On this Ed, what day is it?
Well, I'll tell you, it is September 27th, 2023. It's Wednesday. If that, I don't know what you're asking.
All of it.
With all of it.
So Wentz today is Ed Battaglia, joining me, Tim Wildman, and the esteemed Fred Jackson. Morning.
Yeah, Fred's here.
Mr. Steve, you.
Yeah, Fred's here. That's like being knighted in England. You've been esteemed.
That's Steve.
By the way, this morning was See You at the Pole. Today, September 27th. And that's been, I don't even know how long that's been going on, but it is a time for students to meet at their school, at the flagpole. Hopefully all schools have the American flag on it. And for the teachers, they're for the students, their school, their country, and community. And it's a wonderful thing. It's been going on for decades, I think.
I guess 20, 25 years.
Yeah, like that.
Or more. See You at the Pole.
I'm looking at
History.
began in 1990. I'm looking at the vouch from the See You at the Pole.
Okay, so 30.
Yeah,
33 years.
Began in 1990 as a grassroots movement with 10 students praying at their schools. So,
Amen. Well, it's been all across the country.
yeah, right.
All right. If you want to join us on what Ed calls that their internet, that'll be watch the show. Two ways to do that. Our own streaming service. From our studios here, it's streaming.afa.net. Streaming.afa.net. And then we also have their a lot of other shows and other videos to take advantage of. So streaming.afa.net. Also, you can watch on Facebook Live. Just type in today's issues and access that information live. And Fred Jackson, good morning. Fred, what's big in the news this morning?
Well, the big event this evening in California, Reagan Library, the second debate for the GOP White House candidates. The man who's leading in the polls, Donald Trump, will not be there. He is going to be in Michigan talking to some of the striking UAW workers there. But we will have what's